Recently, I was trying to fix the bug in my code, and I did what naturally all the developer does. I copied the error, pasted in ChatGPT. I got the solution in 2 seconds. And then I realized something really weird. 5 years ago, I would have searched Google, clicked Stack Overflow, read 7 answers, ignore 6 of them, and trust one with 347 votes. But now, I simply ask AI, which made me wonder if developers stop asking Stack Overflow and then just ask AI instead, what happened to the entire system that built the programming knowledge at the first place? Because a lot of developers, a lot of people are saying something in online dramatically that AI is killing open source lately. Now that sounds crazy, but there is a story behind it. Let's start with basic. Open source sounds simple, but it has the strangest economic system behind it. Imagine the business model where you spend hundreds of hours, where you spend hundreds of millions of money, and then you upload it in internet for free. Then millions of companies download it, use it, and make business on top of it. And you make nothing. That's open source. Technically speaking, open source means the source code that is publicly available and can be modified and redistributed by anyone. Which basically means, here is my code, please don't break it. And the crazy part is the system works. In fact, it works so well that the current internet is being run on open source. Linux servers, Apache servers, Nginx, MySQL, Redis. If open source disappears tomorrow, half the internet would be shut down. Your favorite app would be out of the Play Store. Cloud infrastructure would panic. Here's the funny thing though, open source didn't start as some novel movement. It was actually started by accident. Back in the early days of computing, software was not a product. You bought hardware and software comes with it. Universities shared code, researchers shared code, and programmers simply modify or make that code better. Nobody imagined software would be the most valuable product on this earth. Then in 1980s, something interesting happened. Companies started to lock down their software. No source code, no maintaining, no saving. And one engineer really hated that idea, Richard Stallman. He started GNU project. His idea was really simple. He wanted to give engineers 4 freedoms. Freedom to run the program, freedom to study it, freedom to modify it, and freedom to share it. And this idea gave the foundation of present-day open source. But the real explosion happened in 1990s thanks to that one Finnish student. In 1991, Linux Torvalds started something online as a hobby, a small operating system kernels, and that later on becomes the Linux. And thousands of developers start to contribute, bug fixing, modification. Suddenly you have something really special, a software that was developed by the people all over the world for free. At the exact time, the internet was getting global, which meant developers could collaborate across the countries. Open source went from hobby to a backbone of modern computing. Today, Linux powers servers, cloud infrastructures, Android phones, supercomputers, even the servers hosting this video. Linux basically won the internet, and basically open source became unstoppable. Then even something bigger happened. The 2000s and 2010s are the golden age of open source. This is when developers build more stuff that power modern software industry. Apache, MySQL, Python, Node.js, Git, Docker, Kubernetes. They weren't just anymore the hobby project. They are the backbone of computing industry. Companies started realizing something. Open source or softwares are not competition anymore. It is collaboration. Even Microsoft started to contribute or embrace open source industry, which is ironic because once Microsoft said that Linux is a cancer. Now, Microsoft owns GitHub, which is the biggest open source platform in internet. Over 100 million of developers collaborate in that platform today. But open source had another secret ingredient, not code, not knowledge. Because writing code is one thing and figuring out why it's broken is another thing. And that's when the developers came into a magical place called Stack Overflow. If you were a developer between 2010 and 2020, then Stack Overflow is basically your second brain. Got an error message? Search it. Someone already asked that question usually 10 years ago with 3 upvotes. And that one answers that saves your entire day. Stack Overflow became the collective memory of programming. Every weird bug, every problems, it was there and developers relied on it really, really heavily. It was the first place where all our programming knowledge accumulated. And something changed. ChatGPT launched. And suddenly developers realized something. Instead of searching Google, clicking Stack Overflow, reading 5 answers, scrolling through comments, you could simply ask AI. It will explain you everything, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but always fast. Developers loved it, but Stack Overflow traffic, questions started to drop significantly, which led to a strange realization. Are humans stopping to ask humans for the solution? Stack Overflow's 2025 survey shows 84% of respondents are using or planning to use AI tools in development, off from 76% the year before. At the same time, about 35% of developers say their visits to Stack Overflow are due to AI-related issues at least some of time. And here is where things get a little bit ironic. AI didn't magically invent programming knowledge. It learned from somewhere. GitHub, documentation, Stack Overflow answers, open source repositories. In other words, AI learned from the collective idea, collective knowledge of developers. Which means open source trained the AI, but now humans are asking AI. Instead of communities that create the knowledge, we are simply like training the robot teachers and firing all our teachers. That's the paradox people are talking about in online. If we learn from AI, who is going to teach AI for our next generation? Because AI learns from our data. And if we don't provide the data and we are just learning from AI, then next generation wouldn't have any new data. Okay, so let's stop being dramatic for a while and focus on the topic, is open source really dying? Well, yes and no. If by open source you mean the actual software ecosystem, Linux, Git, Python, Kubernetes, database, and cloud tooling, then no, it's not dying at all. In fact, the opposite is true. GitHub's 2025 October says open source development hit record level, about 1.12 billion contribution to public and open source repositories in 2025, with 395 million public repositories overall and 255,000 first-time open source contributors in March 2025 alone, which GitHub says was the biggest month on record. So if somebody says GitHub is dead, but basically GitHub is on fire with the activity, that part is not dying. But if you meant open source as people behind it, the maintainers, the funding, the community knowledge, the governance, then yeah, there are seriously real warning signs. For example, Tideleaf's 2024 maintainer report found that 60% of maintainers are still not paid for their work, and 60% have either quit or considered quitting maintenance work. And then there is also a money problem. In 2024, GitHub and Linux did one survey that found among 501 organizations, 24% mainly consume open source, while only 21% contribute to projects, and just 16% influence projects via leadership or maintenance roles. So no, AI is probably not killing open source, but it is changing how developers learn. The culture is shifting, the tools are evolving, and the way knowledge spread is transforming. And honestly, open source has survived wars. The dot-com bubble, corporate wars, the rise of JavaScript frameworks. If it survived all that, probably it will survive AI also. Because open source is not only a code, it's an idea. The idea that is really hard to kill.